the promises made by Labour weren't delivered. That's the important thing. And the other thing is that there was the first crisis since the war in 1973, oil crisis, which plummeted the economy. And the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, began to intervene with inside European governments, especially the Labour government, laying down all kinds of demands, the main ones being massive cut in social spending, welfare, health, etc. In fact, the biggest cut to the health service was carried out by the minister, Dennis Healey, under pressure from the IMF. So you get a situation where the crisis brings about rising unemployment. You get a situation where the Labour government's in power and siding with management against the workers in terms of that. They draw up a social contract with the trade union leaders, which is basically a no-strike deal. So, and then also they draw up a deal to stop local bargaining, and all bargaining for wages conditions would have to go through the national office. So, in other words, the teeth of the movement were being drawn in the interest of profit. So you get a situation in 1973 that out of the woodwork comes the fascist. They come out of the fascist. In fact, they always appear when social democracy can't deliver. The same as at the moment now with Starmer's Labour government actually trying to win people away from racism by being more racist. You know, maybe we should talk about that a bit later. But the situation in 73 was that the NF began the usual argument is to divide workers. That's always the starter. So racism is their strongest weapon to divide workers. And so in terms of unemployment coming, they're taking all the jobs. In terms of people not being able to afford housing, they're taking all the houses. So the fascist argument rung to a disillusioned people. And so they started to grow. But by the time you get to 1976, two things happened. You had the Malawi Asians were expelled from Malawi, and that was a great chance for the National Front to leap forward in terms of that. And also Enoch Powell, the man who gave the Rivers of Blood speech, which was far softer than anything that Starmer says now. And he was expelled from the Labour Party, from the Tory Party. But Enoch Powell came out and he was the first one who started talking about, he's already said with the immigration had got to be stopped. But he started talking about repatriation. This was 1976, May 76, and this was jumped upon by the National Front. So immediately it wasn't about stopping immigration, it was about repatriation of immigrants already here. The stop immigration was already read. The Labour Party didn't try to do anything about it, they just sat on that. And then in August 1976, a blues guitarist called Eric Clapton, who used to play with a band called The Cream. I'll lay it out now, I never liked that stuff, but I'm always a black music person, me. But nevertheless, he made all his money on black music. Mainly kind of that English blues, which is basically speed it up and take away the emotion. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road either. But he was touring, trying to rebuild his career, and he had just had a big, massive hit with Bob Marley's "I Shot the Sheriff," which I think is Marley's greatest revolutionary song, because he's saying, I don't shoot no deputy because I want the boss. You know, it's a great song. And anyway, he had a big hit with it, and he was touring on that basis. And he's in Birmingham in August 76, and he comes out on stage and starts going on about the wogs taking over the country. Enoch Powell was right. We've got to send them all back. And he started coming out with this raging racism. A lot of us thought for a long time it was short, it was only a little bit, but when we started meeting people who was at the gig, it was all the way through the night. He was obsessed between songs with his racism. And that came back to us, and then there's a few of us who were involved politically. I mean, I was involved. I joined the Labour Party in 1964. In 1966, I became a revolutionary. So I'd already gone down that road of revolutionary socialism. And the thing that drew me more than ever anything was Vietnam War and racism. These are two things that got me to move to the left. And other people like Red Saunders, he was the same as me. You know, we was mods in the early 60s. I spent all my bloody money on mohair suits and button-down shirts and all that stuff, and reggae, and went to all the records, blue beat, not reggae. Anyway, we came from that. We came from that alternative culture of the 60s. And for us, the idea, we were always motivated culturally. So therefore, we was interested in left field cultures. You know, we was interested in European film. We was interested in. But by that time, I was an obsessive John Coltrane fan. So we were already involved in that, but we was also political. And with Clapton's racism, we said we've got to do something. You know, we'd already talked about, because the National Front were getting 16, 17, even over 20% of the vote in some areas. And it was getting quite freaky with the Malawi Asians debacle, and then the shooting of, the shooting of an Asian guy in Southall. No, that was in East London, Bethnal Green. Who was shot in Southall? Chegat Khan, yeah, Chegat Singh. And he was shot, or not shot, he was killed by the fascists. And the leader of the right wing said, 1 down, 1 million to go. And so that was that kind of atmosphere. And then in all of this, Clapton comes out with his filth. We wanted to do something. We was going to do a one-off gig called Rock Against Racism, wherever we could get a venue. And we had no idea what we was going to do. At the time, the music that dominated left field was pub rock. You know, Dux Deluxe, and all those kind of bands. And as opposed to the sort of mainstream top of the pops stuff. And so we thought, okay, we'll get some bands and we'll do a gig. But then he made the speech and it upped the ante massively. And read him, and we was talking about what to do. He phoned me up one night, said, I've written a letter, I'm going to send it to them. And he read it out to me on the phone. He said, would you sign it? I said, yeah, of course. So we sent off a letter basically saying, what you're doing, Eric, you made all your money from black music and you're spouting this racism. You're in the pocket of the business, you know. And we went on a bit. I mean, the letter, you can see the letter. And we said, we said, this was the great ridiculous thing. We said, we're going to set up a movement called Rock Against Racism. If you're interested, get in touch. At that time, I was working for Socialist Worker, and I asked the editor if we could use the PO Box number and that was PO Box 6, Cotton's Gardens. And so we put that at the bottom, said write to PO Box, you know, and then we put a PS, who shot the sheriff, Eric? It certainly wasn't you. And we didn't think, I mean, we just sent that, they put it in the Mirror, the NME published it, record bit of the Mirror, I think it's, I can't, Melody Maker, they did it, it was our letter of the week. Anyway, they published the letter, and within 10 days, we'd had 300 or 400 replies. And so we cut with it. And that's another important lesson for today. Don't assume that everyone out there is racist. you know, because that's what the people around the NF were. That, you know, the English are racist, white working class, whoever they are, and so we had to put our money where our mouth was, basically. So we had to do it. We had to form an organisation. You have to be really careful because history doesn't repeat itself. For us, it was a very Pacific time in terms that two things were happening in music terms. One, it was the development of punk, and the other thing was the development of a reggae that was English-based from the Caribbean. I mean, up until that time, the complete domination within the black community was Caribbean reggae. And the development of homegrown bands developed an English reggae, Aswad, Black Seal Pulse, Black Slate, you know, and all the Matumbi, all those bands were singing about being young black in Britain at that time with the racism and with the with unemployment. And so were the white kids, not about racism, but they were singing about no future. They were singing about, and so that was a social, events were happening at the same time as we was forming Mark Against Racism. And that they were very important ingredients. You can't lift that into the present, but what you can say in the present is that what you got the similar things is a very, very deep crisis in capitalism. The ruling classes of the world have got no idea how to get out of that except to lash out and use terror as a mechanism. So you've got the deep crisis, you've got a stagnant unemployment, but you've got people having to do 2-3 jobs to make a living. I met a bloke the other day who in a cab who was working as a maintenance man in one place during the week, and then weekends he was driving a cab. So he was doing a 7-day week, and he came from Romania, and he came here to make some money so that he'd go back. And what happens is you get trapped here. So that's a situation right across the board in terms of. Then there's austerity. The government's austerity program is made. A lot of us don't realise what it's like for the majority of workers in terms of trying to make ends meet, trying to keep jobs together, trying to keep families together, trying to feed the kids. You know, I mean, we've got the highest poverty of children in Europe, in England. I think it's over 3 or 4 million kids are below the poverty line. So it's huge social problems here. And we've got a social democratic government, which you can't really say they're social democrats. It's an embarrassment to their forefathers to think that Labour's got anything to do with the people before. So you've got a government that is basically no different from the one that was before. And so the alternatives this wasn't quite as drastic as it was in the 70s, but it's very drastic now, is that for the vacuum that this creates, for that to be filled by an extreme right-wing nationalist party like Reform is terrifying. And there's nothing in the vacuum. There's no one filling the vacuum on the left. So that's what's the priority. And the thing at the moment, the racism levels are reaching the levels they were in the 70s. I mean, it'd be interesting when Hatch brings it out about what it was like then, and the amount of people who went to the carnival were shocked how many white people were anti-racist. And I think that's the same at the moment. I think you've got the Palestine movement, which shows when you get 500,000 people on the street and the majority are white, you do get a situation that it's not, that the racist divide is manufactured by the government and the media. That divide is not deep, but nevertheless doesn't mean it can't be exaggerated. So I think the situation now, we need radical culture, we need radical music, we need radical graphics, arts, and it's got to be on the side of the people fighting. It's got to join up. I can't stand art in this kind of period which just reflects the pessimism. You know, art that just, or music that just is no hope music. You know, there's a guy I know on Facebook, underneath his profile, he's got, I am not an optimist, I am a prisoner of hope. Now that's me, I'm a prisoner of hope. No matter how bad it gets, I never give up hope. And because the situation now, because we've got, how do we get, I mean, we had 4 times as many people on the street as Tommy Robinson had. But no, but that's not a mention of that. That doesn't get a mention anywhere that there was 500,000 on the street. We know they were there, and it's been that's the 31st demonstration over 100,000 in the last 2 years. But there's no reflection of that. So how do we connect the people who are disillusioned, who are, you know, how do we connect that with that? How do we bring that movement into the movement that are looking towards reform? How do we do that? And that's the problem that we're faced with. You've got to do the same thing. You first of all, you have to be uncompromisingly anti-racist. And you have to be uncompromisingly for unity. So you've got to fight the tendency to be cultist or to be sectarian, you know, and you've got to fight any idea of compromise. You know, as soon as someone says the people outside the hotels have got genuine concerns, then you're making concessions to racism. You know, we can't make any concessions, and that, by making no concessions and fighting, that is the means with which you unite, because not everybody agrees with it. And it's interesting, there was in Epping, well, they kicked our arse in Epping, twice, the fascists. We overpowered them in the end because we had to mobilise a big number.
What time period were you
in? What, 4 months ago?
4 months ago.
And when the hotel in Epping, the Bell, was the first one that the fascists really succeeded in winning national recognition for. We went there the first 2 times and they beat us. But now, out of that, people who really outraged in Epping have formed an organisation. And they was at a Stand Up to Racism conference a couple of days ago. So out of that, by showing that they can be fought, gives strength and heart to the people who don't think they can be fought, who are not racist but don't think they can be fought, or what we call soft racists. We have to have, the only way that we can pull soft racists away from the fascists is by showing an alternative. So we have to show the alternative, and the alternative is to fight and is to stand for a future where racism doesn't exist.
Do you think part of that is education as well, in some form, to give some people knowledge and about what is happening? Because they like soft races, as you call it. I love that as a terminology of trying to move them away from them and bring them over here. What I'm discovering is I'm having to talk to a lot, try and educate, because there is a version of things that people are believing, and I'm having to come with this is actually what's really going on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Do you think there's a bit of that? And what you did with Book Against Racism was, especially with the designs and the newsletters that went out, were they were educational. You were also at the time highlighting beautiful things that were going on. So not only were you seeing images of punk bands and hearing about gigs and stuff, you were also going, well, here is a whole thing about stop and search, and there was a form of knowledge giving and providing.
Yeah.
Do you think we have to do that today as well?
I think we have to do that. Yeah. I mean, I would love to see the development of, we can't do fanzines, but we've got the technology now. I mean, we had to do it on typewriters and blow it up and cut it out and stick it down. Now you can just do it, it's easy to do. So,
it's better, it's the other way,
oh, it looks much better.
Paste, yeah, it looks
It's like with AIR, it always looks too clean, like it's all been polished. So yeah, I'm in favour of that. I mean, I know people try to make it look like a 1970s fanzine and foul completely, you know. But now, yeah, I think that one of the first things that Ra did was set up temporary hoarding. Temporary hoarding, it was a complete accident that in temporary there's RAR. That was a complete accident. We didn't plan that at all. But someone spotted it and then we made it red. So on the masthead, the Ra was always in red. But temporary hoarding came again from the fact that we was in a tradition of cultural warriors or cultural activists, if you like, because that came from the Russian Revolution, where because of the ignorance, I don't mean that as a derogatory term, because of the lack of literacy amongst the Russian people, the artists used cartoons and drawings and slogans to get over what the revolution was doing and what was needed. And they were temporary. They were put on notice boards. There's a fantastic book called Conquered City by Victor Serge, whereas in 1919, in early 1919, the Neva, or the river around St. Petersburg, was frozen. And the white armies who were going to crush the revolution were coming across the ice from Finland. And in the morning, people in Petrograd woke up to posters everywhere explaining this, telling them this, and saying, go to arms. And the whole population rose up and went to meet the white armies on the ice and beat them, stop them. Those posters were designed by the poet Mayakovsky. And the designs were done by both Mayakovsky and Rodchenko in a thing called, in a special place where they made the posters. Now, that's what we saw temporary hoarding as. We saw it as something that could be read to give knowledge and also to be fly posted. So the inside was always a montage or a poster of some kind that we could put up, but also it wasn't just in terms of search. That was the most important struggle to win the arguments about stop and search and about the fact that the police were our enemy. I think today, no one's got illusions in the police anymore, but nevertheless, at that time, there was the illusions that the police are your friend. I learned from my grandfather that the saying, if you want to know the time, ask a policeman, is not because they've got the stolen watches that they nicked off the drunks the night before. That was the root of that. Anyway, I keep on going off the subject. We did that, but the other important thing at the time was Ireland. Now the troops were in Ireland. They was fighting the IRA. There was a liberation battle going on in Northern Ireland, and so I think in the second or third issue we covered Northern Ireland. The other important thing, because we were trying to appeal to youth, we also run a lot of articles about women under fascism and also sexuality under fascism. To stop young German boys from masturbating in bed, they sold things that you could tie around the kids so they couldn't touch their genitals. I mean, that's the barbarism of fascism. But anyway, so we covered all that, and I think that was very, very important. But we had to do that because the state education system wouldn't or doesn't. It's better now than it was then, and then was much better than when I went to school. But the argument about education is a good one. It's an argument that we have, because people think all you need is education, and it isn't, because education doesn't mobilise people. The key thing that mobilises people is when what you believe that you've been taught by the church, by the school, by parents, by the media, by all that. Karl Marx said a wonderful thing. He said that the ideas of any given epoch are the ideas of the ruling class. And that's what we grow up into. The ideas Racism comes from above, it doesn't come from below. Very, very important. And so so in terms of the education, what was the thing? I kept on losing my place.
No, I was just saying.
What mobilises people?
Yeah, what mobilises people is what people believe comes into conflict with what they experience. Because of the unevenness within inside people's consciousness, completely uneven, and it's got a lot to do with status, how much you earn, and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, it's uneven. But our fight is to get an even consciousness, a consciousness that puts the people first, and not the king or whatever, or the boss. And the way that happens is when people are involved in struggle. If you can't change your consciousness sitting on a sofa watching TV, because what you're watching is the ideas of the ruling class. You're not seeing what the alternative is. But if you're out on a picket line, say, and you've got the police attacking you, you know that the police ain't your friends. If you've got someone trying to break through that picket line to take your job, you know that solidarity is necessary. All those things that come about, when you say, when you realise that the black person or the brown person working next to you at work is the one that they're accusing of, is the same. So your interests are with them, not outside with reform or others. So that's how it changes, and you can change it permanently in struggle. That's what you have to do. When 100,000 people went on the streets to stop the black shirts in Cable Street in 1936, they were put there by conscious socialists in the Communist Party mainly, but also Independent Labour Party, and also in the Jewish community, not Zionist, pre-Zionist. And they went onto the streets and they mobilised people behind them. And you go into struggle because the people in the workers of the East End knew if they came from the Jews today, they'll come from me tomorrow. So the unity that took place was the way that they could beat the British Union of Fascists. And that's exactly the same now, and it was the same with Rock Against Racism. We needed the unity in the community. Is a great slogan we used to have. And so we developed we had temporary hoarding, which was to educate people about the situations, not just anti-racist, but about what capitalism was. But also we used to have a gig guide. At the back of the building, we put how to put on your own gig, because we was very hands-on, do-it-yourself. So we told, and the first words of the gig guide was, remember, this is a political movement. It's not just a cultural movement. Since then, Rock Against Racism has been viewed just as a cultural movement and don't see it politically. So it's a political movement, and so we used to do that. We used to say that never lose control of the microphone, never let racists onto the stage, and all the things that you had to keep on saying that, and also carry banners, make the politics, and so that was the way that we got unity inside that. But the most important thing we did, and we did it on not the first gig, the second gig we did at the Royal College of Art in Christmas 1976, was with Mutumbi and a soul band called Limousine, and it was and Carol Grimes' London Boogie Band. And what happened there is that at the end, I can't remember who had the bright idea. Might have been me, but someone had the bright idea. Let's have a jam session, where at the end, as having an encore, instead of an hierarchy of performers, we have the performers back on the stage to jam, to go out. And that became the solid thing of RA, that you always ended with black and white on the stage showing unity in struggle. I mean, sometimes it backfires. We had the Cimarrons, who were a long time great reggae, right back band, Blue Bleak. So we had the Simrans on with Generation X at Hackney Town Hall. First battle we had was with the keeper, who wouldn't turn off the strip lighting, so the atmosphere was flat. So we got that out. But the most important thing is at the end we said, right, we're going to come all together on the stage, and Billy Idol, who's the singer with Generation, we don't know anything else apart from what we do. And we went, oh, what do we do? In the end, we found out that the guitarist knew a Chuck Berry riff. So we had 16 minutes of Sweet Little 16 with the Simrans and all the Generation X, apart from their guitarist, doing backup, doing vocals. But at least we did it. And it was important. And Leeds, they couldn't do it because they couldn't get a black band, reggae band, so they used to get a sound system. So the other in areas where there was it was possible to get a punk band, but not a reggae band, they used to get the black sound system. So the sound systems became the thing that was the representative of the unity in the gigs. Well, I'm a very old man, but I do actually, yeah. I think the real thing that we won in that struggle was the welcoming of diversity. It was very difficult for us to get black bands, and it was very difficult to get black people to come to audience because people wouldn't usually leave their borough. I mean, it's not only that they didn't know what the cops were like in, say, so a group of people going to a gig from Lewisham coming up to Hackney, they didn't know really what the situation in Hackney was like, so therefore the movement wasn't there. And especially inside the Asian community, it was very difficult to get involvement. Now that's much easier, much easier. And also it's because the music, I was going to put on my two-tone t-shirt, because two-tone was an important development out of that period. And also Rip, Big and Panic. I don't know, you old people probably don't, or young people don't know these bands, but there was bands that came out of our period which were mixed, which were doing a kind of a wonderful, not only were the bands mixed, but the music they was making was mixed, you know. Like Jerry Damners from the Specials. I mean, he would be in he's in a big band now, but although he's very ill, but he's in a big band now where the drummer plays off that reggae offbeat, and then they got horn sections, and then they got synths laying down, sort of dance rhythms underneath it. So the music itself now reflects a non-racist, diverse world, and I think that's important. And the thing that really drives me bloody crazy, we had that really big demonstration. I mean, I know the fascists or the racists had 100,000, but we did manage to put 25,000 on the street. And the mood inside that 20,000 was really up. I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen the film, but when we got kettled by the Nazis, the sound system was turned up and people just started dancing. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the root of it all. You know, that's the music, that's the power of it. So why we don't have, I don't know if anybody's been watching the stuff that's come out of America on No King Day on Saturday. The amount of drum orchestras and marching band, what marching bands? Bands in that sort of New Orleans tradition playing really marching jazz rather than military. I mean, everywhere there was music. Whereas in our march, there wasn't any. And even at the end, it wasn't until all the speeches are finished that they put the music on. Music should have been playing really loud, and you should have got the hardest down-home funk black music as you could, because that really pisses off the racists. Because all they've got is Elgar and Land of Hope and Glory. I mean, you know, or what's that other one? Britons will never, never be slaves. All these slaves walk along going, Britain will never be slaves. And all slaves to the media, to their boss, to the Queen. I mean, it's such a weird world. But I mean, they hate, that's all they've got. They've only got Royal Britannia. And we've got, you know, we got it all. We've got everything. So we need drum orchestras on the marches. We need at least one van playing music. We need a couple of DJs. Really, the demonstrations against them should be full of music, because that's our weapon. That's our great weapon against them, and it still is. It was then, and it is now. I mean, we was lucky then. I mean, even then, a lot of the skinheads who gravitated towards the NF, in the end, their love of reggae or blue beat or love as rock or whatever was playing, their love of that actually made them question what was going on. And we won a lot of skins over to us. I mean, there was a skins against the Nazis badge in the end. So yes, that's what we have to do. And also we have to get visual. I mean, at the moment, there's no visual sense of our movement at all. We need a Red Saunders. It's just terrible. I mean, everybody knew the Ra Star. Everybody knew the ANL arrow. No one knows what the Stand Up to Racism logo is. And Love Music Hate Racism. It's too long. You know, it's all words. We want a visual. We want a visual representation of that. If anybody, all your lot here can design that, that would be brilliant, honestly. I think that was what I just said really is the main one. I think the main one they should take with them is not departmentalised culture. You know, I remember on some RAR things, I mean, suddenly there's this sort of 45-year-old teacher in Huddersfield who books a coach to bring to come to the carnival, and then suddenly, instead of listening usually to sort of either string quartets or whatever, they're suddenly listening to reggae or to punk and I think that power to change that, to be part of the movement is important. And they said, "Oh, I didn't know that what I like to see is political." I don't know if anybody, have you seen that film, One Battle After Another? No. It's the best political film I've seen. Well, also it's incredibly exciting. It's an incredible movie. And if you want to know what it's like living under ice in America at the moment, that's the film to see. Because a central part of it is the militarised police with their masks and their helmets, and all you see is just their eyes, and it's all pulled up here. And they go into a town in the south of America where there's a lot of migrants, but there's organisation already been set up to get them out of the town. So as the police come in this end, the migrants go out that end because they've got tunnels, they've got backup systems, and these exist. We know they exist now. And the man who made the film links a story around that. It's a film. Have you seen it? One Battle After Another. Whew, it's incredible. But we can do that. We can make that. We can make movies. And also there's a tendency on the revolutionary left to think that the only thing important culturally is words. And it's very, very difficult to say that the visual is important. I think, you know, what's the greatest image of the Spanish Civil War? It's Capra's photograph of the Republican being shot, and it's Guernica. I mean, the two things are the visual things, and I think that's the same with the Ra period as well. What was important, and certainly if you think of the Black Panthers in America, it's the panther jumping and the clenched fist. It's very, very, and at the moment there's a dearth of visualisation of our struggle, which we need. Except for, what's his name, Banksy. I mean, it was incredible that he got that picture up of the judge beating that old pensioner. I mean, just to get that up overnight, that is political. That's why when I say cultural warrior, that's exactly what I mean. I think that's really interesting because the lead of the struggle in the last decade, and certainly over Palestine, has been young Asian women. Young Asian women are certainly at the forefront of the struggle. With inside the black boy men communities, I think there's been a forgetting of how they fought there. But also I think the alienation is deeper. I think generally across the board, the wedge that they're trying to drive in, the fascists, and is one that is easier with inside, you know, because of a guy called Tony Cliff used to say that with inside the migrant or the ethnic minority communities, there's people fight not to be at the bottom, you know. So therefore, you get West Indian Afro-Caribbean boys siding with reform because the Islamophobe or the Asian is at the bottom of the pile, the Muslim is at the bottom of the pile. So this hierarchy of discrimination is not as strong as it was. There's no doubt the last 40 years has really, really demonstrated. And I think it is because education is different. I mean, my daughter was the first person, when she went to school, she could say the names of the Sri Lankans. I still can't cope with those 40 character word names. So the diversity that people grow up with now has got a big effect on them, and it's harder for the racists to. That's why most of the people at the demonstrations are between 35 and 45. There's young men from right across the board who fall for that shit about manhood thing. Who's that guy? Andrew Tate. They fall for that crap, but that's not dominant. I mean, the dominant thing is, my feeling, is sense of pessimism because of climate change. Is the thing that affects most young people now is that there's no future anyway. But on the other hand, when we stand up, that's what we were going about earlier, is that we brought out a book called People's History of the Anti-Nazi League. And we're doing book launches around the country. And the amount of young people turning up at those book launches is phenomenal. Because exactly what you're saying, they didn't know about the past. The amount of times I've spoken at meetings with young people and then they say, oh yeah, or they phone me up later and they go, I went home and spoke to my dad and my dad was at the carnival. And that's when they find out their dad was at the carnival. And that's when they find out what the carnival was. And then suddenly, not talking to your dad about his past or to your mum about her past, suddenly it becomes important. And I think that that's why it's important for us to do what we're doing now and what Hass is doing and what you're doing, is that we need to bring our past up to the present. And in the present, I think there's more than we think there are people who, because of the diversity, because their mates at school are from different backgrounds, are much more open to the fight. I mean, you don't get 500,000 on the streets last Saturday. I mean, it was extraordinary. It was mainly young, and mainly again women. What is not on the demonstrations are young black men. I don't know why. I don't know. But they're not there. But the women, right from the word go, have been there. Does that answer though?
Yeah, it has. That's another debate. Black men.
Yeah.
In the political.
Yeah, that is another debate. Yeah.
Debate.
Yeah. But I think the diversity is something that the racists. That's why they're not using it. It's this thing about they're not. It's not about. That's why it's about migrants. It's about boats. It's not about in the community. That's why they can shift it. It's about protection of women, whatever that bloody means. You know, these people are all rapists and bloody misogynists and anyway. But I mean, they're not using the old arguments. Their argument now is much different, but it's equally as racist. I mean, the big thing is the Great Replacement theory about the Muslim replacing European culture. And Trump's a follower of that theory. And that's the present theory with inside the fascist, if they've got conscience. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about fascist theory. I mean, we know that Hitler made certain comments which are important, but by and large, the mysticism of fascism shows that there is no theory. It's just pure racism, and it's generated by greed because they're not making as much profit as they had before. So I think that's something that we have to think about. But because they're using a different grounds to fight, we have to make sure. That's why unity becomes even more important.
Can I ask, what do you remember of the Rock Against Racism Carnival in Victoria Park? Because I know what I remember, but what do you remember?
See, that's important. To be honest, nothing. No, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, me and a few other people, for our sins, we were backstage. I was stage manager. I pulled the plug on the Clash. But I think that the situation was weird because all the way through the week leading up to the carnival, it hadn't stopped raining. And the park was a mud bath. We'd already told the council that we expected 500 people, mainly because we didn't want to hire toilets. We just didn't have any money. We'd bought the sound system with cash from a guy I met, me and a guy called Jerry Fitzpatrick. We met there in Soho. No, it wasn't. It was Covent Garden, a pub in Covent Garden. We hired the sound system and gave them $5,000 cash. The sound system was for rock and roll, so it couldn't deal with the bass lines of Steel Pulse. But in the film White Riot, Tom Robinson says the sound was dreadful. So it was raining all the time. We had to police the stage because of NF attacks. And the policing of the stage was basically, so people slept on the stage for the week before. And that was mainly Tower Hamlets, SW and Anti-Nazi League and RA Group. So on the day I got there and there was no one in the park. And this is before mobile, before anything like that. So we had no idea. X-ray specs were on first. Polystyrene said, should I go on? We had this discussion. There was no one in the park. There was a man with his dog. There was a couple of kids on a push bike. The rain had stopped, but it was dull and overcast. It was like a religious event, honestly, because I came out on the stage. I introduced X-ray specs. I came out, and then halfway through their second song, which I think was is either "Oh Bondage Up Yours" or X-ray singing adolescent. You know the one? I can't remember. Anyway, the march from Trafalgar Square turned up. And suddenly it went from one man and his dog to 80,000 within one 5-minute song. Everybody come to the front, started jumping up and down. The barriers went down. We'd already refused security. from the band's managements, because we didn't want apolitical bloody nutcases on the door, on the gate. Nothing personal if any security people are here, but you know what security are like at those gigs. So, but we didn't know what we was doing. So the fence went down, all these people passed out. We was picking them up and carrying them out the back. And out the back of the, where we were, because it was on an old swimming pool, open air swimming pool. And there was a swimming pool with no water in it, but all the way around, they had a little brick wall that you would sit down and towel yourself, and then when you come out of the water, you know. We was laying kids out on this wall. And then suddenly this guy comes along, and he was a St John's Ambulance Brigade, you know? I don't know if he's still, are they still around? Is anybody, oh, you probably don't know of John's Ambulance there. You know St John's Ambulance Brigade? No. Are they? Yes. When they turn up, they've got the sort of cross of St John's Ambulance. They've got the white, all in black uniform, pea cap. He must have been in his early 70s. He said, you need help? We went, yeah, so this guy spent that afternoon reviving these kids who then went back into what I now know is called the mosh pit to get knocked out again. So I was doing all that. So all you lot were bloody out the front enjoying it. I'm bloody running around trying to resurrect knocked out kids, trying to wake up the park keeper, who we introduced to Still Pulse, and he was stoned. And we gave him a bottle of Johnny Walker's as a gift, not to say nothing about the numbers. So I don't know what happened to him, but I mean, I had to check passes, and then what we did, I didn't know anything about it in those days, but luckily we had a drummer. And it's the very first chapter in the book, Jeff Allen. And he understood these gigs. We bought drum kits on risers. Do you know that? So we had like two bands in front. We had drum kit, the riser had the drum kit on. And then as one band finished, we took the right one out and put a new one in. And it was all going all really well until we got to the Clash. Then the Clash wouldn't get off. They wouldn't leave the bloody stage. And we'd already had a big row with them that they couldn't be top of the bill. We are not a hierarchical thing. And we already decided that Tom Robinson was going to be top because, one, he had a big hit with Glad to Be Gay. Two, he was with us right from the word go, in Ra, right from the word go, and leaf it in with Ra, not just being a star. And also is that we wanted Still Pulse next. We didn't want... So anyway, we didn't... Anyway, in the end, we just pulled the electric plugs, and Jeff Allen took their drum kit away. We brought out Still Pulse's drum kit. So now I miss the bloody thing. And all I remember is at the end going into the pub and having the best pint of beer I've ever had in my life, because the months of planning and all that was over. So yeah. So the stories that come to me from out front, by and large, I'm as excited about as they were then now, because I love to find out how people coped out there, you know. And some of it was great. I mean, the great thing was when Still Pulse came out and done Ku Klux Klan, all dressed as Klansmen. Jesus Christ! I mean, what a thing to do. They did that in Manchester as well. Amazing. I think I never lost that sense of that we can do it, but there are moments when we think we can't do it. I think that's the more the side of it, is that we had a gig at the Polytechnic Central London, and it was it was Misty and Roots and Jimmy Percy's band, Sham 69. And Sham 69 was very popular amongst the NF kids. And we had, security was the Royal Group of Dock Shop Stewards Committee. So all these big dockers turned up with bloody pickaxe handles and all these little skinhead kids. And I thought, if this kicks off, I don't know what's going to happen. And And we was really worried because we was desperately trying to get Jimmy Percy on side. Misty and Roots were cool. They just got stoned at the back, played a couple of games of dominoes, and they were fine, and they weren't worried at all. But I got really worried that night. I got really worried that night that either the Dockers would do something stupid, or the kids would overrun the stage, and so that was a really freaky night. That was not good. And the same thing has happened in Leeds, where we had to tell everybody to take the badges off before they left the gig because there was patrolling NFLs outside, and I thought, we can't do this. How can you do? They can't. But then,
You feel responsibility.
yeah, you feel the responsibility, but also, when you actually, if you get into a street fight and it's automatic, that's one thing. But if you get into a street fight and you have to plan it, that's not so good. You make a mistake, so that wasn't good. And I think the carnival, when I came out to introduce Liz, and there was no one in the park, I thought, this is it. We're done, because I didn't know how many were coming from Trafalgar Square. And now I see the pictures of Trafalgar Square and the march. They were wonderful. Like people was you on the march? Yeah, the people on the march were really buoyant. So the time they got there, they were up for it. I had to lift myself because I was so down. But it was not in Ra, actually, that things got difficult. There was times when we would go down the market in Walthamstow and the NF were already there. And then we had to do a telephone, and then we had to go in physically to remove them. And so all that stuff, I got really down and thought we're battling uphill here,
And how do you get through those moments?
by getting some really tough kids around you. We had Leo, who was a black belt young lad. He lost an eye. NF pushed his eye out. But I think I just got through those moments because I've always, because of organisation, to be honest. I hadn't really thought about it before. But we was an organisation. VAR was an organisation, ANL was an organisation. I joined IS in 1966. I'm still in the SW. So I've been in a socialist organisation all my life. And so the only way that your individual fears are overcome because someone's got your back. That's really it. And you're together in the situation. That was certainly when we had a march against the Nazis, especially in Hoxton. Hoxton was a nightmare to clear Hoxton of Nazis. And then the police. I mean, the first time we had to go at the police was in Leicester. And then right in the middle of all this, of course, is the Bromwich dispute, which there was so much else going on that really I didn't have time to think we can't win.